Sup guys, it's been a little while, apologize about that. Had some shit happen over the last couple of weeks, but now I'm back and it's time to have a little bit of fun. So history is full of pretty brutal ways to die, and we have all of our favorites, but one of mine is probably fire. To be completely honest with you guys, fire is just a batshit scary concept to me because though it's one of our greatest advantages as a species, it's also one of the greatest means of atrocities throughout history. Like, it doesn't take much when you Google fire weaponized in history to come up with some pretty morbid results, and despite its horror, there's generally fascinating stories that just lie behind the use of it that no one likes to talk about. So I figured I'd talk about the favorite means of people barbecuing each other. Fire as a construct has truly evolved as we have throughout history, starting from a force of nature that we couldn't truly harness to that which sparked life through the death of the wooded forests. It became a philosophical and mystical force in our religions and our folklore. Gods were forged both of it and from the ruin it left behind, and eventually it became the chemical might of an industrial age and a precautionary fear of the machines we've invented. But more than anything, fire has been both the shield and sword for our entire culture, as it has warded off armies of significantly stronger standing through all of its pure wildness alone. So at this point, I really want to make a stand here and say I'm only going to talk about fire-specific weapons here and not all thermal items utilized in history. Trust me, man, you don't want me to go down the path but you can look up Roman countermining weapons as well as those big Persian mirrors they used if you're really interested. You'll be amazed. It's not hard to note that it's easy to just whack someone with a torch in a game like Dungeons and Dragons. Being able to light something ablaze without using magic is purely an instinct that your non-mystical ancestors in the Neolithic Age would have utilized fire for. Creating torches and raising rifles, or simply using it as a warding method against danger. From this came the introduction of hot oil, pitch, and tar, which would create sticky flaming substances, which became the inspiration for materials such as Greek fire or napalm, or other incendiary devices that the Romans or Arabs would have used in the time period. Resin, quicklime, natural elements like phosphorus, sulfur, and even the dust off the streets could be added to chemical concoctions of the day which were meant to make fire burn hotter, brighter, and even longer, also adding stickiness or even irritants to them like sand which would cause armor they wore to melt upon contact. I mean, this was all really brutal stuff, but at the end of the day, it all had its purpose and reason for existence, as a contrary to popular belief, not everyone in history is just out there fighting like your favorite anime protagonist for the fun of it. Before the existence of bombs, cannons, and rifling, sieging a position was a nightmare of a job. Even when the conditions were perfect for a siege, there was a matter of overcoming the fortifications and the defenders, as well as keeping your own troops stabilized and out of danger when they needed to rest, while simultaneously keeping all of that away from the enemy camp as much as one can hope to. Now, there's a couple ways you can go about a siege, and all of them are pretty barbaric in nature, but let's go over them. You can go the safe option, which is attrition, but you really never know if that's going to work or not, because, well, a besieged city could attempt a breakout or run the blockade, or simply just fortify beyond your current measure of ability. It's the most common tactic throughout history, and it's in no way a bad choice, just simply not the one we're going to make in today's example. The second choice is attempting a surprise attack, where you go full throttle on the enemy's position the moment you see it and attempt to catch them off their feet. A risky idea, but very effective if you know you have a stronger army than they do. In this case, you would just use sheer manpower to take the position rather than any real strategy, and this can lead to a lot of chaos and potential routing from the enemy. You don't want that. Or finally, you could use siege weapons and sapping units like miners or people who like to use fire in close spaces. These types of warfare often revolved around using catapults or whatever other kind of material you could use to hit them from a range, while closer units moved up with incendiary devices to try and burn gates, walls, or personnel. Miners would be faced with tight space combat, which was impeccable for the use of smaller chemical launchers using animal rendering and pitch, but while effective, it was also a risk for poisoning these same miners. Of these three options, rarely was fire and sword chosen as the tactic. The term fire and sword refers to the use of incendiary weapons, which often found itself in antiquity warfare as the face of combat could be considered modernized ever so slightly by the sheer existence of them on the battlefield. You'll probably note that I haven't included many dates or battles in particular when it comes to flame weaponry, and that's because unfortunately the documentation of specific conflicts are either damaged or too vague to merit sourcing. However, it's notable that during the Crusades, Byzantine Greeks utilized Greek fire against the Crusaders, as well as the two waves of Arab onslaughts which attempted to sack Constantinople. The siege of Larish is notable for the Assyrians' mastery of siege warfare and the flaming arrows which they utilized to decimate the enemy coastal fleets defending the city, and the siege of Paris shows extensive use of hot oil and animal rendering mixtures which fended the city off from the invaders for several days. The history of these weapons of war is fading before our eyes, as documentation for it has either been lost from the historical tragedies or throughout the unwillingness to preserve some knowledge in favor of more advanced forms of technology, i.e. firearms. Guns and field artillery would soon outweigh the need for close-range flame weapons, as now combat became feet and then fields apart. However, in the modern age, we have still seen the use of fire weapons in both the world wars as well as modern conflicts. Though the UN strictly prohibits the use of incendiary weapons in today's battlefields, it is notable that both the United States as well as Russia have been found operating with some forms of incendiary devices as well as flamethrowers in their units. These weapons today operate through chemical mixtures and pressurized nozzles similar to that of Greek fire of old, acting as a means of intimidation as well as for clearing for mechanized units or search and destroy operations. During the World Wars, these would see far more extensive use, becoming one of the terrors which saw the Geneva Convention put in place to begin with. During Vietnam, napalm would be one of the most effective weapons utilized against both the North and South Vietnamese, effectively destroying large swaths of the country to this day. The impact of incendiary weapons had on the world of antiquity is often left unthought of because unfortunately is one of the most disturbing outcomes that can occur from a weapon of war. It's pure erasure of those that it was utilized against. The Library of Alexandria itself was burned, left with an impossible wound which destroyed countless pieces of contemporary knowledge gathered over centuries before our own. The firebombing of Dresden completely decimated the art haven of Germany, permanently erasing countless pieces of precious artwork which will have never been remembered. Rome, Paris, and even the Chinese Empire have been victims to flames, and its impact has helped shape our society as a whole, because fire is a scary power, and it's one that's not likely to go away anytime soon. There's a lot that can be said about incendiary warfare, and I think it's best captured in a novel written by Heinrich Sienkiewicz called With Fire and Sword, which is a slightly fantastical look at the historical events transpiring around his time. It centers heavily on the use of flame warfare and its horrors and paints a vivid picture of the time, one that leaves me with the following conclusion. Fire has evolved with us. It both showcases our compassion and how it feeds us and keeps us warm, as well as our cruelty and how we utilize it for destruction and war. It is both a wonderful thing and a terrible thing, and it's the men who wield it who have the responsibility to choose whether it remains good or not. You know, though, fire hose go brr, and at the end of the day, that's why I chose incendiary weapons. But I didn't want to spend a video just explaining how to create them, so I apologize if this isn't as informative as others. It's just this is a kind of a risque topic, and I'd like to keep it monetizable. Alright, have a good day, folks. Stay cozy and warm, and happy holidays.